All right, it's time for the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. I'm Greg, and Jason is sitting at home with a broken foot. Hi, Jason. What's going on?
Oh, it's all happening this year, G-Dub. I'm just getting this year out of the way because apparently I can't walk anymore either. Walking has become a challenge. It already is a challenge. If anybody has ever seen me walk, it's a challenge already, but it's become even more of a challenge.
What happened and what foot? Everybody wants to know. Been texting me. What foot?
It's my opposite foot to my bad one. So my left ankle, as most know, has gotten bad, and we've been on the road. I've been on the road for 2 weeks. Got home a couple days ago, but I had it all planned to where I could go play Cypress Point with my good friend Jimmy Witten, who got myself and Alex Lowe's, and Jimmy brought a friend named Trent, who was an awesome guy. I got to play Cypress Point on Tuesday. We played Spyglass Wednesday. Just like a dream week because the weather was so good at Laguna Seca at Monterey this weekend.
Oh my God, it was awesome! Yeah,
it was so perfect. And so Monday morning, I had it all set up where I was going to go to. We were all going to go to Spanish Bay, and I woke up Monday morning, opened the drapes. I'm like, oh my gosh, the best day we've had. There was no fog. G-Dub. I think you'd gone already to San Jose, hadn't you? Because you flew out of San Jose Monday morning, didn't you?
Yeah. I had a really early morning flight out.
Yeah. So you'd already left. So on Sunday night, went to bed. I went out, which I never ever do, but we went to that place called Turn 12 and saw a bunch of people there. It was really nice, just running into some people I haven't seen in a while. And long story short, woke up Monday morning, weather was perfect. So I'm literally coming out of the bathroom, just brushed my teeth, opened the door, and I went to grab the closet door because it was right outside. And it was a sliding door, Greg. The bathroom was like a sliding door at the place I stayed. Well, unbeknownst to me, the thing had kind of rebounded and started coming back. But my head was turned to the left as I took a step, and I just drove my pinky toe and the right side of my foot into the side of this door. And it I was on the ground, I felt like I got hit by Tyson. It was brutal, and I knew I'd done some damage. Anyways, I went and saw Alex Lowe's and his brother Sam. We were all going to go, so I went and saw them, and Steve English was there, so he took my spot, which was cool. And Dave Ryan was there, who just hangs out with Alex, kind of helps him out. Went and saw those guys on the first tee, took a picture, and drove home. But got X-rays yesterday. I broke my toe really bad. You can't make this stuff up. I literally can't make it up. I broke my toe, but I've got a bunch of micro fractures in my foot. So I got to watch the weight.
Why wouldn't you? Why
wouldn't I? Yeah, it's embarrassing, and I know, and I take all this grief, and I deserve every bit of it. It's just miserable. So I had to I've been
I'm
waiting.
Sorry for laughing, but dude, it's just like what?
It's
so
just that
things happen in 3.
Bad.
So what's next for you?
I don't know, man. I was supposed to do a one-on-one this weekend with my friend Danny, and I canceled. I'm supposed to go to Washington next week. I know you met Troy and Carol, and you know who they are. I was supposed to go up there and just kind of ride for fun at the Ridge next week. So that's kind of on hold right now because the way my foot is, they don't want me to put a lot of weight and stuff on it. And I told them, well, I want to ride, and if I can, and yeah.
Well, this could be a saving grace then for you in terms of you need to get off that dang ankle of yours anyway for a little while.
Yeah, no question. And I'm gonna be that's got to be the next thing on my agenda is get that fixed. It's a bummer. It's just the way it is right now. But we had a good weekend. I had a blast up there with you over there in Monterey. It was a good time.
Let's cheer you up a little bit and let's talk motorcycle racing because it's your favorite thing to talk about since you've only been immersed in it since you were 0 years old. So
thank you.
Let's kick things off with MotoGP because obviously last week we missed doing the podcast because we were focused on doing our first live podcast, which we just posted up. So we skipped out on the MotoGP stuff from Sachsenring. So let's go ahead and get that started. We'll talk MotoGP, the premier class first from Sachsenring, just to refresh people's memories. We got a lot to talk about, Jay, so I'm not going to go through the top 15 necessarily.
Just kill it.
So Marc Marquez won by 4.5 seconds. Maverick Vinales was second, and Cal Crutchlow was in third, and then Petrucci, Dovizioso, for those Valentino Rossi fans, he was back in 8th. Surprise non-finishers, Jason, Alex Rins, and Fabio Quartararo in this one. Do you remember the race at all? It's a bit
barely. Yeah, feels like it's years and years ago, but no, I do. I remember the race obviously, and it's. I mean, you just basically all you got to do is talk about Marquez. The guy's unreal. No rivals.
Especially
we talk
in
about
Deutschland,
this all the time,
right? I mean, especially in Deutschland. He was.
I mean, he's just
10 for 10.
10 for 10 there now or something.
Yeah.
It's a joke, isn't it? You just cannot discuss how good the guy is. I mean, he's just unreal. And now he's got such a big points lead. He doesn't care. He's just going to go ride. I do think that there were some storylines that you've kind of already, I mean, when you look at Vinales, it's good to see them doing well again. And I got a couple questions I wanted to pose to you about the Yamaha, because it seems to me, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, Greg, but it seems to me that with how well the Petronas team has done with Morbidelli and especially Quartararo, you kind of wonder, because Greg and I don't have a direct pipeline into the MotoGP paddock in the sense that, we're making phone calls every week. But to me, from the outside looking in, maybe the Petronas guys had gone away a certain way with the setup of these bikes, because Vinales is now a lot stronger at the beginning of the races and he's stronger through them. You almost wonder if they've gone a direction that Vinales has bought into and Rossi just hasn't, because, Valley struggled again. I mean, he's 20 seconds back, running around in 8th, can't make any passes really. But Vinales kind of seems like he's really stepped up the last 3 or 4 rounds.
That is the word coming out of the paddock, is that Petronas Yamaha SRT went a different direction. And this, of course, showcases the strength of having as many riders as you possibly can, Jay, on factory level equipment, is that you are able to do things like this or to get data like this. So that is the word coming out, that's the case. And
okay. Honestly, Greg, that was purely a guess.
Yeah, no, that's the word. Now, I don't know about the Rossi thing. It would appear that Rossi hasn't either fully bought into it, or whatever they're doing isn't working for him, And Jay, look, the thing is with Rossi is that he's the GOAT, no doubt about it. There's all those things in line, but he's reinvented himself so many times as a rider that I find it really difficult to believe that all of a sudden here we are at, I don't know, was he 40 now or whatever?
Yeah, he's 40, yeah.
At 40, that he's finally going to put a stop to it. I
see a decline or...
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, but how do I explain this a little bit better? In my years...
Well, he's evolved so many times. That's one thing you always talk about, is the reason why you call him the GOAT is no disrespect to the guy winning everything right now. It's just that through the test of time, how much Valley's had to change everything all the time,
right?
All the different bikes,
right.
That's one thing that you talk about. And I couldn't agree with you more, but in every sport, there's got to be a decline.
Right. There, absolutely. But the thing I'm focused on is I've seen it throughout the years of a lot of racers that have come into the paddock, that have retired from the paddock, kind of a thing. They get to the point where it's like, I've said this in private to people before, but let's say, for instance, someone says, you know what? The bike I had 2 years ago, we need to make this motorcycle work like that bike from 2 years ago. When I hear that, 90% of the time, it's career over.
Yeah, I know that is a big thing with you, and you get that because of all the time you've walked around the paddocks for 25 years and gotten to see riders jump from one brand to the other and one bike to the next. And
yes, and it's
a sticking point with you because it's relative, though.
Yeah, and Rossi hasn't ever done that yet that I know of.
Yeah.
So what I am saying is yes, there might be a decline. I don't doubt it. Of course, there has to be, and not a decline in reaction or skills necessarily. I think it all personally, after seeing what I've seen, I think it just comes down to drive. As you get older, a guy gets older, testosterone starts to, be less and less and less aggressive. And, you're sitting on a pile of money or whatever. But anyway, all that stuff aside, there might be some decline, but I am wondering if after all the different types of riding styles and the way Rossi has done it, from the 2-strokes, from the big bikes, from the 1000s to the 800s to the 990s and so on, that if maybe he's finally put a stake in the ground and said, yeah, but this is the way I ride a motorcycle. That's the thing that is sitting in the back of my head, if that makes any sense.
It does, but I'll tell you this: like, we got to remember, this is the same guy that chased everybody home at Doha this year, and has had some tremendous rides. That even at Coda, he ends up second to Rins. I mean, he's come close to winning this year. But when you look at the one thing, Greg, that is the common denominator behind his lack of success in the last 4 rounds, it's qualifying, and the Yamaha has proven it's very difficult to pass once you get stuck behind riders and being able to find your way. And contrary to that, you see Vinales is now qualifying so much better, because how many times have we seen Vinales light it up in the last 10 laps of a MotoGP race where he starts coming forward, fuel loads go down, whatever the case is. And Rossi's done himself no favor. I mean, the guy can't even get out of Q1 to get to Q2 to try to move himself up the grid. And it was, kind of the same thing in Sachsenring. He starts a little further back. Very difficult. You see him kind of trying to make his way forward. Any little mistake, though, he gets past, and it proves to be very difficult to get him back. I mean, look, he was 3 seconds out of finishing 4th. He was in that battle with Petrucci, Dovi, Miller, Joan Mir, and Morbidelli. And so it's not like, I think when you look at the result of him finishing 8th, he was only 3 seconds out of finishing 4th, which I don't know if it comforts the blow when you're 16 seconds back, but it's definitely seems to be there's something missing from the time they roll it out of the truck, and he's not there. But the Yamahas with Vinales and the other guys are a little bit different. I got to say, Cal Crutchlow finishing 3rd, you being a cyclist, I know you probably heard about his injury. It sounded like he had a cracked tibia just below the knee from, what was it, Greg? He was like changing a tire and slipped on a cobblestone or something and literally fell over. He wasn't even riding. And breaks the tip of his tibia or fibula. I believe it was tib. I believe it was the big one. Wasn't even sure he could ride. And next thing you know, he puts the LCR Honda in 3rd in what would arguably be, and he was closer than that because he was right with Vinales, and he made a mistake with 3 corners to go on a lap and a half left.
Something like that. Yeah.
And it brings, I mean, you got to say that's a tremendous ride for him. I mean, for a guy that we never really talk ill of Cal, but he has struggled finishing races at times. What a tremendous effort.
I think so. Yeah. Hats off to Cal on that one. All right, let's talk about Quartararo's crash at the beginning and Rins' crash with 12 laps to go. I mean, let's talk Rins' crash first with 12 laps to go, because when he crashed, he was about a second behind Marquez. He was keeping Marquez honest, and he just pushed, and it was kind of a big crash. What did you think about Rins 2 in a row now?
Well, I think that what you see a lot of times with riders trending in a negative way, first off, Rins to me is between him and Quartararo, those are the 2 young guys that are going to be pushing the sport forward. Quartararo is an interesting story to me, as is Rins, but Rins crashing 2 GPs in a row, and where he crashed so early in the water slide. That's the turn that they call the water slide, down that big fast right-hander at Sachsenring going downhill. We've seen spectacular exits from races there in the past. This one, though, Greg, almost looked like it was in the transition from the left to the right, almost like there was no weight on the front of the bike when he tipped it in, and the thing just went from left to right. Because if you watch the video, he crashed so early. He's pushing. I mean, he's wanting to win races. But you see sometimes where he's getting to the limit of this Suzuki now, kind of a bit of when he crashed at Assen, they were talking about how windy it was, and they felt that maybe when he tipped into that left, at Assen and fell. But the common denominator between the 2 crashes were that they happened so early in the corner. It's not like they happened at the apex and the front went away. These are accidents that are happening very early on the transition from upright to turning, or from going left to right. So that could be something that they're looking at. When you look at Quartararo, you and I have talked about on the podcast, unbeknownst to you and I, but we knew that he had made it through 6 rounds, including testing where he had never put that Yamaha on the deck.
Yeah.
And now he's crashed out of his first race. This looked like an innocent enough one where it's like he's pushing, he's trying to, go with the leaders. This is the deficit of the Yamaha, though, that we just talked about with Rossi. He's trying to make moves early to try to get by guys, and just, he loses the front innocently enough and looked like he broke the bar, so he wasn't able to keep going. How he responds and rebounds from that that the next actual race, not qualifying or practice, but race, will be interesting to see how he comes back.
Yep, it certainly will be. You want to move on? What do you think?
Well, I think one last thing is talking about the factory Ducatis. Petrucci and Dovi finished, fourth and fifth. Miller's right behind him.
They all finished
so
within
much
like
talk.
0.2 of each other, So
yeah, and they were just really non-factors, weren't they? I mean, they were literally non-factors.
I mean, everybody was a non-factor, really. But I mean, I know what you're saying.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think the fact that Petrucci passed Dovi and made that stick, it shows that Petrucci doesn't care about, that I don't even want to hear about the Marquez versus Dovi thing anymore, because it's Marquez versus everybody. It's whoever's going to step up and be there with him. But I think that those guys, they struggled at that one. It'll be interesting to see how, I think Brno will fit the Ducati much better. I expect those guys to be up front more. Another tremendous ride by Paul Espargaro, a guy that we talked about. He was so badly injured at that test and the test after at Catalunya that they weren't even sure he was even going to be able to ride again. He put in a tremendous effort at Assen. He's in the points again. So interesting week. Yeah, Greg, Moto 2. When you sit there and you look at Moto 2, when you look at what's happening there, Marquez, he's really just come into his own, hasn't he? Arguably he could have won the last 5 in a row had he not gotten tangled up with Baldassarri. He goes on and wins this race by 1.2 seconds over the newly signed MotoGP KTM rider for next year, Brad Binder, who is showing some form right now. Marcel Schroeder in his home GP ends up third. And then you had D'Antonio and then Luthi, obviously fifth. I think that when you look at it right now, the points lead that Marquez has, it should be a lot bigger than what he's got. And he's really come into his own. I know there's going to be some spots available next year, whether they're quality spots or not, and whether he goes on to win the championship. Do you think he's ready to just go to MotoGP now after the form he's shown this year?
I think so. In terms of what we've seen from other riders, look at the guys who have some rides now that haven't performed nearly at the level that Marquez is performing at right now. Right? Quartararo came out of nowhere, did he not? So
yeah, you're 100%.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So
yeah.
I definitely think that it can also be a bit of a boost for the series. I mean, obviously MotoGP in terms of viewership is absolutely fantastic, but in terms of actual racing, if you go back and look at the margin of victories, it's not the greatest racing ever. So I think MotoGP continuing to develop stories, Marquez, Alex being in a race on a good bike, would be something special. I think the Brad Binder move is very interesting. You're talking about he finished second. So it was Marquez, Binder, Schroeder, DG Antonio, and Luthi, your top 5. Iker Lecuona, your boy on the American Racing KTM, had a shot, and
he did.
He had a shot at a box. He was in 4th place, right on the rear wheel of Schroeder, I believe.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Then binned it. And that was a heartbreaker because obviously American Racing team, Joe Roberts in the mix on that team. But anyway, and it looked like KTM actually had something this week, and this is before we get parts. But the Brad Binder story is great because I would love to see Marquez and Binder go, and then having those two, if the KTM chassis gets a little bit better and starts to match the Calyx, I think we could see a Marquez Binder battle for the rest of the season, and that would be a heck of a storyline if you have Alex Marquez going up with Brad Binder into MotoGP as just another little storyline for the Premier class. Now, the Brad Binder thing is great. You talked about it, Jason. He's going to be replacing Hafid Sirene, who's going to be out on the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 team. But Brad Binder is the story because, he started in the Red Bull Rookies Cup, and then he went on the Red Bull Moto 3 team to, the team he's on now, Red Bull KTM, and now he's going. So that's one of those success stories that you look at it and say, hey, Red Bull Rookies Cup. I remember when that was around in the States, and Brad Binder's really the first guy to get the direct line from ground zero all the way to factory ride. So I think that story is pretty cool, actually.
I do. I think it's going to be a nice little payday for him as well. Like, he's been loyal with the team he's been on, and we've seen him come from Moto 3 to Moto 2, now to MotoGP. Greg, as a rider, I don't know what's better. Well, I do know what's better. I'm lying to you about that. When it comes to riding in a race where you know that you can be there for the championship in Moto 2, and it seems like they have found their way again a little bit. I don't know if going and getting on a, let's just call it a B- to C- grade motorbike is what's best for somebody like his career, because right now there's only one guy that's proven even capable of riding that KTM to any kind of level, and that's Paul Espargaro. And if you watch him, he is so on the edge in every corner of every lap that it's to ride it at that level is difficult. I mean, it's not really fair to talk about Miguel Oliveira this year, but when you talk about Oliveira, it's his rookie season and this and that. I mean, Zarco's nowhere to be seen. Oliveira is really, for the most part, nowhere to be seen. Serene hasn't even shown up this year. The poor guy has been lost on this bike. I mean, I don't know. Is it better to just stay in Moto 2 and try to win that championship again next year when you know that maybe Marquez is gone?
Yeah, but the carrot, you got money.
Carrot's MotoGP. The carrot's
MotoGP. It's obviously there's some money in there. But the one carrot that we're not talking about is that team could be saying, but we have Danny Pedrosa. Danny Pedrosa is not 100% healthy yet, but we have this, and this is the direction we're going to take in developing the bike. Like, that's the conversation that we don't know about. And the worst part is that when we were at Laguna Seca, one of the guys in the photo, the guy who manages Brad Binder, which is Bob Moore, the champ from 94, he was in the photo when they signed the contract, and he was at Laguna this weekend. And I asked him, like, why? Yeah. And he just kind of smiled, and that was the end of it. And usually Bob will tell me something, but so I wonder if there is that thing behind the scenes that says, here's our plan. Here's our chassis development. Here's our engine development. Here is our test rider and what he has said so far, but he's not given us 100%. So I wonder if there's that, the promise of, by the time you get to ride this bike in 2020 or 2021, that we're going to have a Honda beating, GP bike.
Yeah, and that could be the carrot. It's a 2-year deal, and I think that, when you look at the amount of rides that are available next year, Siren's gone, that spot's filled. You look at the Aventia riders with Abraham and Rabat. I don't know how many people are going to be signed up to just go rip over to that thing. That seems like it's kind of again, I don't know, but both those guys, I think, have money behind them. So, where are these guys going to go? I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Lorenzo at the end of the year. I just think that if he's on the form he's on right now and he keeps getting hurt, and there might come a time when Lorenzo just goes, I'm out. Who knows?
That was reported last week, by the way, that Lorenzo's been considering retiring. And then
again,
there were counter reports saying no, kind of a thing. So, I mean, look, if there's reports out there, he must have just mentioned something to somebody along the way. And as I do, once that thought creeps into your head, just that little bit of seed of maybe retirement's not such a bad thing, it can take a hold of somebody pretty quickly, and it can spell the end quickly.
It can, and it's like, it's these. To be honest with you, it's like they're just educated guesses. I know, when you see what Lorenzo's done, and man, it's just got to be a hard struggle for him. But yeah, I think right now, Alex Marquez, getting back to the Moto 2 thing, he's the guy to win the championship this year. And you got to like the idea. Where I was going with it is, if there was the chance that either Honda buys out Lorenzo retires, I mean, Marquez could slide into there. I don't see him going to like a, you know what I mean? I don't see him going to like an Aventia Ducati ride, and it looks like Miller and Bagnaia are kind of going to be set, and it looks like the factory, obviously all the other factory teams are set. Where does Alex Marquez go? So who knows if that would even be an option, but it would be a dream team, I would think, for Repsol, obviously for the brothers, for Honda.
Boy, that would be a talking point. I didn't even consider that. Yeah,
that's where I was going with it.
But all Marquez ticket, huh?
Can you imagine? I mean, it would be an interesting thing. So we'll see what happens. What about Moto 3? Did you watch it?
Oh yeah. I watched Moto 3. Did you?
Oh, insane.
I mean, how can you not watch Moto 3?
It's the sickest.
It's the sickest race out there. I mean,
gotta watch it.
Margin of victory was 72 hundredths of a second. Della Porta getting his first win over Ramirez, Aaron Canet, Fanati, Fernandez, John McPhee, my boy I Ogura, his sister, of course, racing in the States last couple times. Suzuki's Sasaki, and then Jakob Kornfeld, who was up there again, towards the front earlier on in that race. Couple things, Toba crashing out, yikes, right?
Not a shocker.
Not a I guess. Obviously Toba was the early points leader. Kornfeld for real, Jay. You know what I mean? Now is all of a sudden, Jakob Kornfeld. I know the result wasn't exactly there this time, but he's running up front all of a sudden last two races after getting a talking to. So, that's a question obviously I have for you. And, Jay, with 12 laps to go, there were 8 riders that were covered by a blanket,
They were all there. Marcos Ramirez finished second. The guy I'm just completely impressed by for the whole season is Aaron Canet. Like, he's quietly putting this championship year together. When you look at what he has done, he just happens to keep himself out of trouble the whole time. And I know he's second in the championship now. It's really become a 2-horse race between Canet and Della Porta. For that kid to get himself up to third the way he did, he was back there 10th, 12th, the whole race, G-Dub. And we've seen him pull some crazy moves, and he was able to get third. And, Fanati, again, had a good ride this weekend, along with Raul Fernandez, who's a rookie to the Moto3 class. It just seems like every week, Greg, there are new guys that you and I get to talk. Not necessarily new guys, but every weekend, because they're racing so close, I agree with you. You got to watch this class because from 1 minute, you can literally go from first to ninth in one lap so easily. And Toba crashing again, it pretty much ends his championship hopes.
Yeah.
You see the guy, he's a little bit like the Baldassari of Moto3. Baldassari is either winning or crashing, and Toba's a little bit like that too. But Dalla Porta winning his first Grand Prix, leading the championship now over Canet by 2 points. It's just a class that you want to be glued to the TV on.
It is. 1 second covered the top 11. Well, 1.064 basically. And some names back there. You have Jan Anjou, who was 14th, that finally scored some point. The Turkish rider who the last race of the year last year, coming from Rookies Cup, all of a sudden won a race, and everybody thought, wow, this kid's going to do it. But he's been struggling. Jami Masia finishing 16th. There's some names that are just out, Yeah, there's crashes like Foggia. And what do you make of Darren Binder at this point?
Man, I don't know. It just seems like every class we have those guys that kind of tip off a bit. And he's so... When I heard he crashed at... Gosh, I want to say it was Catalunya. I'm like, well, that's not a shocker. They kind of say, oh, where's Brad Binder's down? But the poor kid got taken out there. But when you hear that Binder's down, it doesn't shock you. Darren Binder, yes. Binder. When you hear that Darren's down, it doesn't really shock you. It's like he's so over the edge. It's a little bit like Remy Gardner maybe in Moto 2, where you sit there and you go there's just guys that you look at and you go, man, they have so much talent, so much skill. Let things play out just a little bit and try to get a result, try to finish, try to bring the bike home regardless. And I know that everybody wants to win, but it's so much better than ending up in the gravel every single weekend. It's, what do you make of it? Yeah, it's another non-finish, right?
He just seems desperate now, and I think it's just getting worse for him, for Darren Binder, meaning it's steamrolling like another non-finish.
What a great way of putting it, steamrolling, because that's what he does. He steamrolls through people. He's a big kid. And you're right, he does. He just he found form at the end of last year, if you remember, because he was on the actual the main KTM team last year, and he found form with 4 or 5 rounds to go. They found a setting change in the bike, but by then his ride had already been taken. Jorge Martin was coming up from Moto 3. So that ride wasn't going to, I'm sorry, who was it that came through? Canon Chu. They signed Canon Chu to Moto 3. So he was coming up from the Spanish series, and Darren Binder was out. So he signed on with another team to be on a KTM, and he's proven to be fast, but again, steamrolled through, like you said, G-Dub. That's
and it's a kind of that I lost my ride. I've got to get back up front real quick and show everybody how good I am. You know what I mean? It just seems very, I don't know. I don't want to say desperate. Like that's the word rattling through my head, but it's not desperate. It's just like rushed. Like, you know, it's just, there's no real plan. It's just like hold it wide open and see what happens. You know,
there's no plan.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what goes on. That's going to be a fun championship to watch at the end. Now, Greg, one thing I was really kind of eager. We've talked a lot about it. I've gone from like not giving 2 cents of wanting to think about it to like now being a little bit intrigued. Did you watch any of the Moto E stuff at all?
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. That was good.
So
the start was crazy. Like, did you listen to the start of the race? Electric bikes, all of them going on at once. Yeah, I thought it was cool. I mean,
like,
people
you're sitting there at the hot dog stand on the backside of the track, and all of a sudden you hear the announcers getting fired up about the race that's starting, and you're thinking, I don't hear anything. Like, can you imagine you're at a MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3 race for the weekend? All those bikes are deafening, and all of a sudden you're grabbing a beer or whatever it is you're doing, and you hear the announcer losing his mind, and you're thinking, what's going on? But hold on.
To that point, real quick, a lot of people don't realize this about MotoGP, and I don't know if it's still the case, but I know this was the case some years ago. MotoGP has a decibel limit. It's a minimum decibel limit, and I believe that minimum decibel limit is something crazy like 100 and it was like 125 or 130 dB, something along those lines. So on a MotoGP bike, they want to make sure that everyone hears those bikes. So, you know, these Moto E bikes are, just like you're saying, in direct conflict with that, you know, that edict that says the louder the better for MotoGP, you know, because you got to feel it. They want you to be able to feel a MotoGP bike as it comes by you. This one, not so much.
So, no, exactly. But I'm going to give you one little piece of information here, and especially for all the I don't know, the electric bike people out there that are like, this is the lamest, this is stupid, don't even want to hear about it, don't want to talk about it. I want you to think about one thing. In this race, if I was to just poll everybody that doesn't care about this race and say, what do you think Marc Marquez's fastest lap was compared to a Moto E bike, an electric bike? Greg, it was a mere 7 seconds. Now, people will go 7 seconds is an eternity. I get it. This was the very first race for Moto E ever to only be 7 seconds off of a factory Honda on a guy who's won 10 out of 10 motos, or who's 10 out of 10 at the Saxon. Greg, fastest lap to fastest lap was only 7 seconds. And it's incredible, right? I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I thought they were going to be like 15 seconds off. That's what I thought. I thought, they're going to be. Now, I'll make it even crazier for you. Off of Moto 3, Greg, they were 3 seconds off. I'm sorry. Off of Moto 2, they were 3 seconds off. The fastest lap in Moto 2 compared to the fastest lap of Moto E was 3 seconds.
So definitely a Moto E bike could have raced in Moto 2, but towards the back, right?
It's not. What I'm saying is this isn't like a, I know you, and I'm not calling people out, but one of the reasons and it was a tremendous series for a bunch of people, like a ton of people, it was a tremendous series. But back in the Harley 883 days and the Harley, like, to me, it was just like, okay, it's spec racing. Harley's putting money into it. It's great. It's giving people like Eric and Ben Bosterman. We can go right down the list of all the people that helped, which is tremendous. Okay?
Yeah, for sure.
But it didn't really interest me. It wasn't like something that was like, I don't know how to explain it because I'm not trying to hate on it. But the Moto E stuff, to me, the thing that makes it so cool is their prototype chassis. And I don't know if you watch, but they're spinning the rear wheel, blue smoke pouring off them. The diversity in the field. So we had Nicky Tooley winning over Bradley Smith. Mike DiMeglio ends up third. And I mean, you go back. If I asked how many people knew who Hector Garza was, they'd say no. And it's like they don't know who he is, or Matteo Ferrari. They don't know who he is. But when you look at the dynamic of what this is, I mean, you had Sete Gibernau finishing ninth. So you got a little bit of everything. You got Maria Herrera, even though she was injured, she participated. You got her racing. So it's got this like crazy sort of 18 riders, but the pace isn't like, it's not like dog slow.
No, it's not. It's not dog slow. And the racing up front was really good between Tooley, Smith, and DiMeglio. They were battling back and forth. Garza was in there. And I thought it was awesome. Now, the race got cut short. It ended up only being 5 laps when it was supposed to be 7. But that was because
Which is that's the part of me that's kind of comedy, right? It's kind of funny, but
yeah.
When I say it's funny because it's like it's a 5-lap race, but 5 laps of whatever.
But to your point, Jay. Okay, the point is they're still trying to figure out how much power, electric power, do we give these bikes versus the track, the elevation. Bradley Smith was a guest on here and he talked to us about that. Remember, depends on the and there's a lot of elevation at Saxon Ring, which means that it's going to take a lot more power, a lot more juice to get those things going than a flat track. So it was 7 laps just to be safe to make sure that those bikes finished on one hand.
Yep.
On the other hand, one of the bikes tipped over, causing the red flag because there are certain procedures that have to be adhered to with an electric motor. And something happens. I don't know the specifics of it exactly, but there was like a red light flashing on the bike when it was tipped over, signaling to the corner workers that they were not allowed to touch the bike, like that there was something wrong. And that's what caused the red flag.
Didn't it catch fire, Greg? I thought there was an electric fire.
I don't know if it was a fire. I mean, that would be my guess.
Okay.
And I know that they sprayed it with some special, fire retardant stuff that's not what you would normally use in a gas fire.
Yep.
Yep. So that's another thing that the series has to consider too, is the fact that you have to train your corner workers. You have to have special equipment, all that kind of stuff. So it adds something. But overall, I thought success for Moto E. I did. I know it was only 5 laps, and you're right, Jay. If you look at the list of entry, I mean, Josh Hook is in there from Australia. Your boy Kenny Foray, who made a big name in World Endurance, is in there.
Yeah.
Nicola Canepa, who was in World Superbike and Moto. I mean, it's Nico Tirol is in there. I mean, Randy DePune is in there.
Yep.
So I thought it was really, it's got a lot of legs to it. I'm not poo-pooing it yet. I think it's very interesting. I think for Bradley Smith, reading through the lines, I haven't had a conversation with him. The fact that the very first Moto E race that he finished second at that race really it pissed him off. He wanted to win it. He posted things saying that he's the only rider in history to stand on a podium in all 4 MotoGP classes, right? So I think it's 125, Moto 2, MotoGP, and now Moto E. And so I think it's great. I think it's great. Bradley, I'm sure, would have liked to have those extra 2 laps. He had a plan in place, but like you're saying, Jason, if you're 7 seconds off the pace, okay, at the fastest lap in the race, and in terms of pole position, Tooley was only like 6 seconds off of what Marquez's time was, then I think you have to go, oh, not bad for a first effort. How fast are these things going to get? Because on torque, they're torque, and the whole thing with the knee bike is controlling the electronics control the torque. That's because you can go 0 to 100% with a flick of a switch. So it's all
no question. And I'd love to ride one now. I think it'd be fun to ride because they have a lot of they don't look slow. I mean, they weigh like 500 pounds, but it's crazy. It's really, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't even know when their next one is. We'll look it up, but you got to at least, that's what's so cool about the MotoGP website is you can just go on there and you can look at things and see things and all that. So it's pretty cool.
All right, let's move to World Superbike, Jason. And
let's do it.
All right, so we missed Donnington Park. So we're going to talk about 2 World Superbikes. So we're going to kind of blow through Donnington really quickly because I think Laguna,
let's do it.
They're going to be on their summer break. They only have 4 rounds left. So in Donnington Park, for World Superbike specifically, Johnny Ray won race number 1 with Chaz Davis and Razgatlioglu in 3rd. This was back in Donnington Park. Bautista finished out of the points in 17th. In the Super Pole race they had, it was Ray, Chaz Davis, and Tom Sykes. Bautista, no go on that one. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong things, Jay.
Yep.
I'm like, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. I'm reading this stuff from Laguna. I'm reading this stuff from Laguna. So let me go back to Donnington. All right. So Donnington.
Let's go back, G-Dub. Let's
go back in time. Johnny Ray, Sykes, Haslam. Okay. 4 Brits winning Donnington. Race. What a shocker. Race number 1. Super Pole race, Ray, Razgatlioglu, Haslam, Bautista in 4th. Then you had Ray, Razgatlioglu, and Bautista finishing on the podium. So Johnny Ray wins all those races, right? And he walks away with the points lead. So coming out of there, it was a huge swing in the points, Jason. Bautista having a DNF again, all this kind of stuff. So looking at Donnington, what'd you think?
All right. Well, first off, let's just say right now, and I'm going to get hate for this. I'm going to get hate for it. We single-handedly have watched the biggest choke job ever in the series. No question.
Agreed.
Like, and people have said, hey, I said Bautista's winning the championship. I had finally been convinced. And it's only because of one reason. When a rider of Bautista's level has a 60-plus point lead and is on a bike that basically he could finish second in every race and then win the ones that he's got remaining. We have literally seen the biggest choke job ever. And again, we're going to get more hate, but this is the difference between an absolute world-class rider who has every thought process going through his mind. Johnny Ray was finishing second in all those races. And people were bitching because he was complaining about the bikes being a little bit different speed-wise. He's a racer. That's what we do. If we don't feel like there's something that such and such's bike is a little faster. Anybody that watches the MotoAmerica races this last week and watched how hard Cameron Bobier was trying to pass the Yosh bikes and can't say that the Yosh bikes have a little bit of an advantage right now, they're not looking the same thing. It's not making excuses. Johnny Ray was not making excuses. It's a valid fact that the Ducati is fast. Okay. And all we heard at the beginning of the year is how much better these MotoGP guys were. And all the time I'm saying it's all crap. But Johnny Ray finished second in the races he had to finish second in and was piling points on and got to the races that he thought he could do well in. And he kept putting the pressure on. Bautista goes off and crashes in Jerez. He crashes in Assen. He's just not Assen. I'm sorry. At Jerez and then at Donnington. And it's like 61 point lead. And he's already succumbed to the championship. Johnny Ray wins all three races. I think the impressive thing about that weekend, again, when you look back, I think Loris Baz was impressive. He ends up fourth in race one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Sykes the BMW is getting closer on pace, and we'll get more into that when we talk about Laguna here in a minute. But it's not a matter of like loving Johnny Ray. It's the guy's a 4-time champ for a reason, isn't he, Greg? And he worked hard with his team, and they got the most out of their package they could. And they were willing to go, hey, if we keep riding as hard as we can and doing the best job we can, and we finish second, what can we do about it? We're going to have to re-establish ourselves in 2020. But he just kept doing what he's doing. And we've literally watched somebody throw this championship in the garbage. That's my take.
Okay. And I think it's a fair take, and we've documented it on this podcast from the first time that Johnny came on to after he won in Imola, his first race. He's been singing the same song, which is exactly what you're saying. We're going to keep putting our heads down. We're going to grind this one out. We're going to see what happens. I think that he was definitely convinced, after the Imola thing, that this championship might be out of reach. Because, Jay, if you're Jonathan Ray, the way you race a championship, if you've given up 61 points and you know how many races there are left in the season, I'm not saying he gave up, but from his standpoint, if he's going, I judge the world by the way I view the world, the way he would race the championship with a 61-point lead is completely different from how Bautista ended up doing it.
Yep.
And then give that championship away. So I can totally see where Jonathan was like, all right, well, listen, we got what we got. We'll go race it and see what happens. And here are the racetracks I think I'll be better at. And here's the racetracks that I think Ducati will be better at, or Bautista specifically. And it hasn't really turned out that way. Now, I am jumping ahead a little bit, Jay, but you want to talk about a choke. Okay, so Bautista comes out and wins the first 11 races, mm-hmm. right? Or he wins 9, 10. He wins 11 out of 12. Well, no, 11 because we didn't have
a race at Assen.
That's right. We didn't have the Super Pole race in Assen.
Yep.
So he wins 11 out of 11. When we go to Imola, that was the first time that he didn't win a race.
First time he got beat. Yep.
First time he got beat, and then he gets 7 points. So was that third or something?
And incidentally, when he got beat there, he blamed he rode great. He got on podium and stuff, but he basically said the track was unsafe. Nobody really complained that Bautista was bitching about the track being unsafe, but That was more or less, it's a hard track. He had tested there 2 weeks prior. Just keep all that stuff in perspective, It's like,
Yeah. But Jay, do you win a championship? So since they arrived at Imola, so you had Imola, Jerez, Misano, Donnington Park, and now Laguna. That's 15 races. He's finished, Bautista. Finished 9.
yeah.
So since Imola, we got to Imola, he's only finished 60% of the races run in the last 5 rounds.
Yep.
You can't win a championship like that,
Well,
And none of those mistakes, well, I shouldn't say none of them, but most of those mistakes had just been on his own.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Greg, the psyche of a rider is interesting because what ends up happening is and you know how I am. I never compare myself to any of these guys. Like I don't. What I did when I raced is completely different than where the level that these guys are on, and I respect them. But I was on a bike. That was expected to win one year, and the worst part is that when you're expected to win, and then they're getting, how can I explain it? People are making excuses for why other guys aren't winning. It puts this psyche in your brain of like, screw it, I got to go win every race. I'm going to show everybody that they're wrong. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to win every race. I think that, and it's no question, what our listeners and people don't understand outside of the paddock is that there's a the way people talk within a paddock, it's a very realistic way because they're there every weekend, aren't they, Greg? Like we are literally there every weekend. We see things that maybe the outside people don't see. And within the World Superbike paddock, it's without question, they realize how good the Ducati is. And they also realize how good Alvaro Bautista is. Tremendous. Okay. But when you look at what he has done, it's almost like he is saying, I'm going to continue to win every race. And because I have to, because I'm on the best bike. And if I don't, it's the conversation will go back to how great Johnny is. For him to go and throw the thing down the road at Jerez, and then he throws the thing down the road at Misano, and then we know what he's done. Then he does his thing, throws the thing down the road at Donnington. I mean, it's actually tragic. It's like one of those things that would be hard to live with because now we're hearing complaints about the Ducati. Oh, well, we've been having this trouble all year. Really? Like, really? When you're running off 11 straight, there was no complaints. It wasn't like, oh, we can continue to make the bike better. It's like, so when you look at this, the pressure that's been put onto him weekend in, week out, I think is a little bit he's put some pressure on himself because it's like he's expected to win every race. So that first race, when he threw it down the road at Jerez, I went, But then when he did it at Misano, I was like, uh-oh, like, now things are going to get interesting because he's got a guy that's won 4 times, has a great team, has great everything behind him. So before we go into Laguna, Greg, did you see this thing with Tom Sykes at Donnington?
I did, but why don't you explain it to people that didn't get to see it?
Well, for me personally, I don't really care what the reasons are, but this is where race control is just for me personally has gotten out of control. I get that they need the bikes back in Parc Fermé within 5 minutes after the result. Tom Sykes basically crashes because the race gets red flagged, big accident, motor blows, about 4 or 5 riders or more go down. The leaders have got the red flag. They're going back to the pits. And I'm willing to give Sykes, Ray, Bautista, Lowe's, I'm willing to give these guys the benefit of the doubt of not seeing something. And I've been in places where the corner workers have been out on the track waving flags and this and that. I literally have been in a race in a red flag situation where corner workers have been waving things and seeing guys crash still. Now, let's not take a bad situation and make it worse. Tom Sykes ended up finishing on the podium in the Super Bowl race when the race was red flagged. He's on the podium. And because he can't get his crash bike back, because he fell in the oil, then there was that much oil, he falls in the oil. And because he can't get his bike to Parc Fermé, they exclude him from the results. Never mind, the race is over. The red flag has been out. But because he can't get his bike back to Parc Fermé, they're going to exclude him from the results. And if you watch the video closely, Johnny Ray almost crashed in the oil himself. Like, it was foot down moment type of thing. I saw it. What if Johnny Ray had crashed? Couldn't get his bike back. You're going to exclude the guy that won the race as well? Like, it's no more. It makes zero sense to me. And it actually just frustrates me when I see race control getting so involved in silly matters like that.
I mean, it is a rule, right? Because who was the commentator that I think it was Steve English maybe that was actually saying at the time, like, whoa, if he doesn't get that bike back to Parc Ferme, he's not going to get the points. So, you know what I mean? I just think, like, how do you do that? If
I don't even understand it. Like, you think Tom Sykes tried to crash on purpose? And I hear all the scuttlebutt. Oh, the riders were going too fast. They were like, stop it. Like, how? Like, when you determine now you just painted the biggest gray area ever. What's too fast? Like, what is too fast? Like, you're coming back and even if you see flags and stuff, obviously Tom Sykes couldn't see the oil. Obviously, otherwise he wouldn't have hit it. But rather than really go like, okay, hold on a second, there was that much oil. We're not going to exclude a guy from getting his points in his podium. I'd be so pissed off if I was not just the rider, but the team and everything else. And I see that I think Stuart Higgs came out with some things afterwards, and people were jumped on the bandwagon. Oh, well, what's Stuart? I get it, but it doesn't matter to me. Like, the race is over. Red flag is out. Like, the fact that he couldn't get his bike back to pit lane because they got to measure fuel or whatever the case is, to me, is completely a moot point. I don't care if you have people guarding that motorcycle as it gets pushed back to Parc Ferme or however it had to get back there by truck or whatever. You don't exclude the guy from the podium.
No, you don't. I mean, the red flag had nothing to do with him. Yeah, I agree with you. That's something that has to be looked at and
yes,
ratified immediately. Like, it should have been ratified there.
Haslam didn't even want to be on the podium. First thing he said was it's not really right that Tom Sykes isn't here. Razgatioglu said the exact same thing. I mean,
so did Jonathan.
Where is it that as a series we've just lost touch with reality that much that like, when you and I talked about this originally, the one thing you said is like, okay, so the race isn't over until after all the bikes get back to Parc Ferme. So a cool-off lap isn't really a cool-off lap. It's still part of the race.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is, all right, let's just go some crazy whacked out scenario that just popped in my head. So what you're saying is let's say that your wife is pregnant, Jason. She's dilated, water broke. Now you're rushing her to the hospital, right? You're rushing her to the hospital. You broke the speed limit. You get pulled over by the police. Okay, and you say, but my wife is in labor. And the cop goes, well, I'm sorry. It's a posted speed limit sign, so you're going to have to stay here while I run your plate, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to tell me that there's no wiggle room in rules that you can't say to, like, who's going to protest that and be like, no, absolutely. He didn't, it's in the rule book. He didn't get I think the spirit of the rule is there for a reason. I get it. But in this case, you go, guys, okay, that was totally out of Tom's control. He didn't see the oil. Johnny nearly crashed in. We didn't have corner workers on the racetrack pushing people away, saying, don't go near here. You know what I mean? Like we've seen
what about
club
this?
Races and stuff. Yeah.
Hey, Craig, what about this? What about Tom Sykes goes in there, loses the front, and cleans out Johnny Ray?
Yeah, true.
On the cool-off lap.
Yeah.
What do? You exclude Johnny Ray and Tom Sykes from the podium?
Yes, you do.
Because they couldn't get their bikes back?
That's the rule.
Come on,
so
man.
Now what?
Come on.
Let's just say the top three balled each other up.
Yeah, but it's just
now you're at Lance Armstrong.
Keep drawing these scenarios over and over.
Well, now you're at Lance Armstrong Tour de France. Sorry, that guy's disqualified for drugs. This guy. So the guy, he finished 23rd. He didn't get tested. Wins the tour. Come on.
Yeah,
a little common sense, people. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. All right. So real quick.
Yeah.
So we go there. We go to that race. Johnny Ray leaves there with all this momentum. And before we go further, real quick, when you look at that weekend, we also had because obviously we're going to talk about Superbike a lot right now, but we also had World Supersport, which was an interesting race where Jules Cluzel wins. Caricasulo had a big opportunity to really make some big points up on his teammate, but still comes home second. Lucas Bias really seems to have found something with the Pachetti Kawasaki over the last couple of rounds. Randy Krummenacher came from absolutely nowhere, ran down the leaders and couldn't get past. The old adage of catching them is one thing, passing them is another, really played true. This has been a championship this year that's been really interesting to follow. DeRosa ends up fifth. There wasn't really a ton of attrition. The racing up front in World Supersport this year is, I don't know, Greg, it's probably been a little bit better than it has been in some of the past races that we've seen over the years. More consistent. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that when you kind of look at what's going on now, Cluzel, obviously he wins, which is a good result for him in that team. Championships is obviously really close. I'm literally trying to pull it up right now, Greg. But
what in terms of championship close itself?
Yeah, Caricasulo now is gotten a little bit closer to Krummenacher, but we're starting to see it's the fact that Maes is getting up front on the Cowie is interesting me a little bit, because we've heard rumors of some other manufacturers maybe thinking about building some 600s again. And I think it would be great for the championship if they were able to see that Cowie's pushing things forward and go from there. But as it stands now, Krummenacher 173, Caricasulo 158. So still looking at 15 points. Clazel pretty much out of it. I mean, I say that we've seen, what we just talked about in World Superbike right now. We've seen bigger gaps get destroyed, but right now it's a 2-course race between the two teammates.
My biggest thing about this race was, Krummenacher was there, but he wasn't there. Like, if you look at the results, he was 0.8 of a second back, but he really wasn't in the mix. If you're Caricasulo, I think it was an opportunity missed for 5 extra points in this championship. He, misses it by 1/10 of a second. So to me, it kind of
tried. He definitely tried.
But Cluzel just looked hungrier. I don't know.
I guess,
yeah. But it's a great championship. I don't think the points really show what was going on with Caricasulo at the beginning of the season. Meaning it was Krummenacher winning, Krummenacher second, Krummenacher winning, and Caricasulo third. Now all of a sudden we've seen this championship shift. So a bit of a pivot, Krummenacher gets 13 points, loses 7 basically to Caricasulo at Donnington. They have 4 races left only. I don't know. 15 points is going to be tough for the way Krummenacher's riding, and we don't know if this particular race was his first time off the podium all season. He's only finished first or second, Krummenacher has. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do before September 8th, if anything, if they're going to test or whatever. But I thought that it was a good opportunity for Caricasulo to make up points, and he missed out. And as we know, 1, 2, 3, 4 points could define a championship, and this could be the race that decides it for Caricasulo. If it loses that championship for anything under 5 points, I think he's going to have to look back at Donnington and say, opportunity missed. But
agreed.
But the race was good. It was very entertaining, Jay. What about World Supersport 300? That was a decent race. Yamaha's first victory. Sabatucci wins.
Well, yep.
What? Unless
Sabatucci Greg, it was a tremendous race,
right? It was great.
Again, 1.9 between first through seventh. I don't really think it tells all the story. There were some things that when you sit there and you talk about race control, the move at the beginning of these guys that listen, if you're a racer, the last thing that you should be doing at the start of a race is going from one side of the grid to the other, because you put not only other people at risk, you put yourself at risk. And we saw a start line accident there that is absolutely, for me, you take the guy off the grid and you sit him out. They gave him a ride through penalty. And Greg, I'm sorry, but his name isn't coming to my mind right this second. This is where we need our good friend Steve English, who you and I met this weekend, coming in and telling us. But when you look at the move at the beginning of the race, they gave the rider a ride through penalty. It doesn't even fit the crime. You clean somebody out to start. And then if you see what Hendra Petrama did in that race, going into the second hairpin there, or the first hairpin, he just literally just cleaned this guy out. And I never really heard another word about it. And how you can take those two incidents, and still allow a rider to finish a race, but you exclude Tom Sykes from the results and a crashing after a red flag. It's insane to me. Yeah. So, but the racing itself, again, at the front, unbelievable. 2 Yamahas finished first and second. Callanan ends up actually third. Stillman, Janig, Otten. I think, we saw Anna go down. She was able to pick her bike back up and finish 19th. I think the most interesting story about the weekend in this race, Greg, is the fact that Manuel Gonzalez comes in with a points lead of 108 to 65. He has this huge points lead and doesn't see anybody chip into it.
0.
He was
top 3 in
the
points.
race.
Gonzalez, Anna Carrasco, and Scott Deroux. DNFs. Nobody scored points, I should say. Nobody scored any points. So
correct. Nobody scored enough. Like, his point lead stayed the exact same as it was when he went in there, which has just got to be kicking the shorts to everybody else. I mean, I think that when you see a rider that's out and you go, oh, and I think Carrasco was really trying to get to the front, and we never really could see the accident. It looked like her and a couple others may have got together, and she got the worst end of that deal.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's kind of what it looked like to me. So yeah, that was a drag for her because I think that it was a big opportunity for her to try to gain some points back before the summer break, go into the summer break with some momentum and still feel like she has a chance at the championship. But it's going to be really hard for her to make up all those points.
Yeah, only 3 rounds left for them. So had she taken that full 25 points and cut that lead basically in half, a little bit more than half, it would have been, possible, I guess. 43 points with 3 races left. Anything can happen in World Supersport, no doubt, or World Supersport 300. But yeah, I agree. Anyway.
Well, let's get to this weekend, Greg, because we've got through some of the old stuff now, and you know how these podcasts go for us. Hopefully, we're keeping everything on topic here. But the Laguna World Superbike weekend, to start with, first off, it was amazing to see all the fans. I thought from the paddock show that Michael Hill was doing, there was always activities. There was always stuff going on. And that's a lot to do also with our series with MotoAmerica. There's a lot of outside the box thinking going right now. You and I got to do our first live podcast, and we had Wayne Rainey, obviously, on the podcast along with Dallas Daniels and JD Beach as well, who was doing all 4 rounds that we'll get into. But when you look at the Laguna Seca World Superbike itself, it goes back. I think that we've seen one rider that you and I are more than happy to see back up at the front. There was a lot of different storylines as far as the championship played out. Alvaro Bautista does not score a single point coming to California. The second crash, when you look at it in the Super Pole race of him getting cleaned out, well, I couldn't believe he crashed in turn 5. He had some big battles with a guy that we're all happy to see, Chaz Davis, back up at the front again. But Bautista, the storyline has to be Bautista scores 0 points. The championship now is, well, dare I say it, Greg? It's out of reach. It's 81 points or something like that.
It's out of reach if you're racing Johnny Ray. It's you know what I mean?
124 points that he's gained over the last 4 or 5 rounds. I've never seen, Greg, honestly, and please tell me if I'm wrong. Have you ever seen this big of a collapse ever?
No. I mean,
in any other racing, 20 years, 25, I've never seen it. I could say the last time that I saw somebody with a gigantic points lead that lost the championship would have to be Mick Doohan in 90 when he broke his leg that severely. Do you remember when he broke his leg that bad at Assen?
Yeah.
And they sewed his legs together, and he had this gigantic points lead, and he came back and he tried to ride at South Africa, I believe it was. I know it wasn't South Africa. It was Brazil. He came back and tried to ride at Brazil, and it was if you go back and you look back at some of this stuff, it's amazing watching what they went through. But he lost the championship that year after having like a 70-point lead or something. Sat out a bunch of Grand Prix and this and that. But
he sat out a bunch of Grand Prix.
Exactly.
He sat out.
Yes, that's my point. I've never seen anything like it.
It's not even in the same wheelhouse.
Never seen anything like
it. It's 61 points plus for Bautista. Now it's 81 minus. So it's 122 point swing. I mean, it's crazy. And like I said, it's only and that's in 15 races. So 5 race weekend, really 4 race weekends. If you look at it, that's it. 4 race weekends.
And you look at race 1, it's Ray Davis, Rizgatioglu, who's amazing this year. I mean, he's really come into his own.
Yeah.
Tom Sykes 4th, Alex Lowe's 5th. How about Jordi Torres? I mean, how many times I'm not blowing my own horn, but toot. How many times have I said Torres? I really rate the guy.
Yeah, good.
I think it's great. Michael Vandermark, who's still injured, Greg, so he's not himself. Loris Baz Melandri. Rinaldi ends up 10th in race 1. I think that, I don't know, Greg, when you look at stuff, Johnny could have easily just put it on cruise control. There was no way that was going to happen because he's going to take advantage of whatever he could in that first race. The Super Pole race, again, at the very beginning, Rizgatioglu and Bautista get together down in turn 2, and that had championship ramifications on it. But Ray wins, Davis 2nd, Sykes 3rd, gets the BMW up there. He beats Rizgatioglu in that shortened Super Pole race. And then right behind that, you had Haslam finishing 5th, Lowe 6th, Baz Torres again in the top 10, Mercado and Vandermark 10th. And real quickly, I'll let you know in the last race, which, this is the one that you and I were pretty stoked because I was able to talk to Chaz a little bit. I saw him at the hotel, and obviously he's not giving anything away, but it goes back to everything we talked about at the beginning of the year, that Chaz Davis is a world-class rider who beats Johnny Ray straight up on his days. Okay, this is a guy that we rate. Chaz wins race 2, Johnny Ray second, Riscatioglu third, Alex Lowe's. Alex did a pretty tremendous job this weekend on the Yamaha. He was consistently fast Yamaha. Gets a good result there in 4th. Sykes, Haslam, Baz, Torres again, Melandri, Rinaldi. It was great seeing Chaz win. And he had told me that, Jay, he goes, we finally kind of went a direction that I've been wanting to go for a long time. This was after Friday evening, and he was quickest in Friday afternoon, I believe. And he says, we finally found something. And in my text to him after the race was, let's hope that whatever we found or whatever you found here translate to other tracks, because Chaz could be a real player at the last 4 rounds of getting some real good race wins.
Couldn't agree more with everything that you said, Jay. And that I asked Chaz too. I saw him, I can't remember, Sunday morning, I think. And we were talking briefly about it. And he said, yep, we changed some things. And I said, can you tell me what they are? And he was like, no, but I can tell you what they've solved.
It's good you asked the hard questions, though, G-Dub.
You know, I'm like, come on, Chaz, you used to race here in the U.S. You know what my research is like. But, World Superbike, he's protecting it a little bit. But what he did tell me was that it comes down to basically, the way the bike turns mid-corner. It had been pushing the front. It kind of reminded me, the way he described it, Jay, was something. Remember when you were racing the Suzuki, the GSXR 750s back in the day? They used to have a problem with not enough trail in the bike. It would push the front, like on the exit. As soon as you initiate gas, it would push the front. And that's why they came out with these 10 millimeter fork extenders. If you remember the fork extenders we used to have, those types of things to fix that problem. But that's kind of the way he described it. It was kind of mid-corner, get on the gas, and it would just push. And whatever they did to change it, I don't know if they lengthened the swing arm, gave it more trail, whatever they did, it's working for him, because he got to finish the corner. Where the Ducati really impressed me in terms of turning ability was down at the bottom of the hill, turn number 2. The way he would finish turn 2 and set himself up for turn 3 was really incredible. I mean, he was on the inside of the inside paint with the bike already turned. And I was like, whoa, this thing looks so much better than it had at the beginning of the year for Chaz specifically. So again, when you have riders, I didn't ask him about riding styles, Bautista versus Chaz, but obviously they have different riding styles in a way that their setup works, because Bautista and Chaz now are going in completely opposite directions in terms of race results.
Yeah, but the thing is that the feeling that when you hear about the mid-corner issues and you look at what Bautista has done, a lot of his crashing is obviously on tip-in in turn 5. At Jerez, it was on tip-in into turn 1. At Mazzano, it was on tip-in into turn 4, tight right. They're all very early, so there's a feeling that maybe and to Bautista's credit, he honestly says, I don't really know what the problem is. But you don't know what the problem is, but it could be something that he was living with or getting away with. But now the pressure's been put on because everybody's gotten a little bit closer, and we're getting a little bit more. We're getting guys closer to us. It's not like you can just run away and win. It's some of the tracks, the last 3 races, it's made it a lot harder for him to the crash that he had in the rain could have happened to anybody at Donnington. I'm talking about Bautista. But the thing is that maybe Chaz hasn't been able to feel the front, and that's why the results are where they're at, instead of keep crashing it down the road every time. And it's just as frustrating to finish 10th and 9th and 12th as it is crashing. I can assure you that. Like, Chaz has had to withstand that. And for him to get that first win, you could see just how stoked he was, because it's like a big weight off his shoulders. He can stop listening to the talk of nobody else can get this bike to work other than Bautista. Yeah. It's got to be frustrating. It has to be frustrating. And for him to get that win, I think especially at Laguna, kind of a home race almost for him, to be able to do that, just it had to give him a lot of satisfaction. And like I said, just in the brief text I had with him even this morning was job was done. I was super happy about that. Now let's go forward and see. I mean, the next race probably can't come quick enough for him.
Yeah, probably. I think the other thing too is it's really timely for Ducati as they started to lose that stranglehold on the championship and things started to go sideways. And Ducati's very involved when we come to WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, right? They had Carl Fogarty in there. They unveiled the new V4R with the 916 livery with the number one. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of. So for the Ducati field, the Ducatisti that were there, it just couldn't have come at a better time. I think getting those couple of podiums for Chaz. So I'm really pumped for him.
And now they got another guy to truly root for. Like it's Chaz is a good dude. There's rumors that and I don't think it's been announced, but there's kind of rumors that he's going to be staying where he's at, which I think is tremendous. Like it's a brand new bike. Chaz has done a lot for Ducati as far as winning for them in the past years.
Well, he told me he's on a 2-year deal, and this was the first year of a 2-year.
Oh, okay. So he's there for sure next year already. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. Which he was happy about because he was like, can you imagine the way I performed the first half of the season or whatever? Like, he goes, I wouldn't have a job next year. I'm like, it's not that bad, Chaz.
Yeah.
But,
No, and it's and it's funny. It was. I'm glad I ran into him and I got to see him because generally, I don't like going up to any of these guys on race weekends. I just don't. I mean, I threw something out there to Johnny as well, Ray, because I didn't go over to him, and you and I had this discussion. It's such a big weekend for them, and they've got so many obligations as there is. You always feel like you don't want to take up their time.
Well, I mean, I would if we were commentating it, which we've done in the past.
Correct.
I definitely would.
Of course.
But the fact that we weren't and we didn't really have any business to be there other than, to say hi, I'm of the same mindset you were. Just kind of let them get on with it. I mean, I even ran into Alex Lowe's and to Sam Lowe's, underneath hospitality, MotoAmerica hospitality when they were eating. And it was just like, I was there for 2 minutes, hey guy, how's it going? Because obviously, Alex has been on the podcast. We know each other, whatever. But it was just a quick hit, hey man, how's it going? We had a couple laughed about you and what a moron you are. And then we left, we parted ways. It was.
Yeah. Well, I got to hang out with those guys a lot, obviously over the course of the weekend. And I've got to hang out with Sam, his character, by the way, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I want to share. It's just so funny, but we'll save it for another podcast. But he's a riot. Alex is obviously Alex. I got to know him pretty well. Did you get to talk to Eugene at all?
Yeah, I talked to Eugene in a parking lot. I mean, that's one of those things. So I talked to Eugene after.
I didn't want to bother him either.
No, exactly. So it was Saturday night. I think I was there at still at 7:00, and he was just walking out. And the story with him obviously is he's just trying to get through the weekend. He's very self-deprecating about his riding right now, and he didn't have a great, finishing results, but he's still injured. PJ Jacobsen was set to step into that ride if Eugene felt that he couldn't ride. That didn't happen. Also, real quick, Jay, let's update people on JD Beach because JD Beach was doing double duty MotoAmerica World Superbike. In race number 1, he had a mechanical problem. He had an OEM shifter that actually broke. And then in the Super Pole race, he absolutely got cleaned out. By Del Bianco.
Del Bianco just cleaned him out.
And it hurt him. It hurt him a little bit. And then JD wanted a point, but he finished 16th. He wanted the top 10. So in race 2, he did. He finished race 2. He was in 16th spot out of 17 finishers, just ahead of Del Bianco, a minute back. But I thought that JD, even though he was injured in race 2, I think he did a good job this weekend. I think nothing to be ashamed of. The lap times were interesting. In testing on the Pirellis, he went a little bit quicker than on the Dunlops, but ultimately the MotoAmerica bike, whatever, it just worked a little bit better. And he was faster on the Dunlops. There is a little difference in the motorcycles. People were curious about it. He had 2 bikes. One was set up for World Superbike and one for MotoAmerica. The only real distinction is we don't have an RPM limit and World Superbike does. So I think he lost about 500 or 700 RPM. So that's going to take a little bit of something out of the bike, that way. But so, good job for JD Beach. Anything else you want to talk about World Superbike?
I think it's such a hard. It's almost now like we've seen it a couple times, and I wish Richard could run 2 teams, like one in World Superbike and one in MotoAmerica.
Stamboli, you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, Stamboli. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's me not mentioning last names again, Greg. Sorry. I think that the thing is it's like when you look at it, it's a hard weekend to do 5 races now, right? Because with the Super Pole race, it's almost too much. Doesn't matter how good a shape you are or how bad you want to do it. It's hard to get your real true debriefs because you're going from one bike right to the other, and then you got to debrief that, and you're like, it seems like there's a lot, and then with all the other obligations that are going on, it just seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely a lot of work.
It's hard.
Yep.
But Johnny Ray leading. I'm going to give you one more stat just before we leave because you are the stat guy, but I'm pulling them today, Greg.
Yeah.
I'm pulling them.
Yeah.
How about this? Total laps led this year. Batista 171, Johnny Ray 121. 50 laps more Batista has led this year overall. And what'd you say he's behind now? 80-something points?
81 points.
80 points. Alex Lowe's moves up to third. Kind of an interesting thing between Vandermark and Alex because he had a horrendous Jerez did Alex. That's where he got bumped in the first race and then didn't finish the second two. And then, boy, Vandermark's crash at Mazzano was one of the worst we've seen as far as nasty. He comes right back and races at Donnington, which is amazing. And we know Vandermark is good at Laguna because he's proven that, like, to kind of be there close. But he struggled this weekend. I think he was hurting still. Bike broke, I think, in one of the races. So top three right now are going to be Ray, Batista, and Lowe's, and it's a pretty big battle for third there between those guys.
And we won't hear from World Superbike again until the 8th of September. So
like 2 months. A lot of these guys are off to Suzuka.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we'll keep an eye on the Suzuka results. All right, Jay, let's move to MotoAmerica, and we're gonna breeze over MotoAmerica, Jay, because we'll talk in depth more about MotoAmerica when we do our pre-podcast for the next race, which will be Sonoma. But let's go Superbike first, because in race number 1, it was Tony Elias by 0.7 of a second over Garrett Gerloff, and surprisingly third, I think, for Cameron Beaubier, JD Beach in fourth, Jake Lewis. In race number 2, it was Garrett Gerloff with his very first MotoAmerica EBC Brakes Superbike win, 4.449 over Tony Elias and Cameron Beaubier third, again, as those two had a ding-dong battle. Josh Herron rebounds from a crash in race 1 to finish fourth, JD Beach in fifth. All right, Jason, the way the points spread now, 39 points for Tony Elias over Beaubier. Sum up the weekend. What'd you think?
Sum up the weekend. I think there's a couple things to sum up for me. Number 1, Tony Elias knows how to use the equipment to his advantage. We've talked about this 1,000 times. You're always going to have bikes and riders that gel well together and experience. It seems like Tony is a lot more focused this year, even maybe than last year. I don't want to sell the guy short on that. I don't want him to think that I didn't think he was focused last year. It's just that he just seems he has got his sights set on one guy at every one of these races. And he knows right now if he beats Cameron, he's going to win the championship, because that's just kind of how the points are right now. No big mistakes. Don't throw any races away. We saw him do it at Road America. I think that the last 4 races, winning 3 out of the last 4, really sets a statement to the rest of the field. Second thing, Cameron Beaubier is how can you not be frustrated for the guy? You got to be frustrated for him, because I just think Cameron is just such a good rider. He's such a great champion, but he couldn't get away from the Yosh bikes on Sunday. And that was the difference, because his teammate took advantage of Tony's mistake up in the corkscrew on the first lap, and Garrett ran with it. That kid rode so well. He did exactly, and I say this on the telecast, that all year long you've been kind of like saying, Jay, when he gets the lead and can run his laps, he's going to be tough. And you called it. It's like, that's where Garrett's most comfortable, isn't it, Greg? Like when he gets in front and he can just go run his pace.
Yeah. And, I talked to some other racers that have raced around Garrett since he was a kid, and that's the way it's always been with him. If he gets out front and controls the pace, he's dangerous. And, I thought the weather was relatively similar from Saturday to Sunday in terms of race conditions. And if you look at the total race time, Tony Elias won that race in 32 minutes and 50 seconds. And Garrett Gerloff did it in 32 minutes and 42 seconds. And why that makes a difference. Wow. 8 seconds different. And he won by 4.4. Now for Tony, he actually was about 3 seconds over the total race distance quicker. He did it 32.47. But the fact that Garrett did it in that, quick of a time, and he was not being pushed, to me was very interesting. I mean, I believe that he did have the fastest lap of the race, our race winner, Garrett Gerloff, at a 124.5. Elias, Beaubier, Herron, JD Beach, those were the riders that were all in the 24 range. Skoltzy just out at a 25.4 in terms of fastest lap. So when I look and start to analyze, and yes, I said it on the broadcast and I confirmed it, that this is the largest margin of victory, by the way, Jason, so far this season in an EBC Brakes Superbike class, 4.4. which says a lot. It says a lot that you have, Tony, the race winner from the day before. But where I think it's really interesting is the fact that on an equal machine, Cam Beaubier finishes 4.7 seconds back.
But I don't think that tells the whole race. I think that the fact that Garrett got clear track ahead of him and was able to run. The thing is the consistency. 8 seconds is a lot. And when you look at race pace from one day to the next, but he was still dipping into the 24s late in that race. Like there was nothing that was going to say, because Tony had actually got it under 4 seconds at one point, like 3.8, 3.9. And next thing you know, it's back up to 4.2, 4.5. The reason why he beat Cameron so bad is because literally Cameron just couldn't do anything. There was one specific time where Cameron started to get a little bit of a gap, and Tony got underneath him at 11, stood up. Cameron killed all of Cameron's drive, and that allowed Heron back by. And it was almost like you could see the wind going out of the balloon, or the air going out of the balloon, because Cameron just kept trying and trying and trying. And it's the first time I've ever really seen the kid frustrated on the podium, where he wants to say what he wants to say, which is what we see, that the strengths of the Yamaha, he couldn't take advantage of it because he couldn't get by the Yosh bikes long enough to do it. He had the same pace as Garrett. I fully believe it. But Garrett did such a masterful job of getting out front and running and literally watching his pit board. And the moment that he had up over turn one was probably a good thing, because it got him back and probably kept his attention of like, whoa, like I still got laps to run here. But just to see, it's always fun for me. It's fun for us, I think, when we see a new winner, and to see how stoked he was to win was a lot of fun for me.
5 race winners in 12 races is great. The thing is that I'm noticing, Jason, with the Yamaha is that I think they worked in the offseason to try to get Cameron's bike more raceable, racing a Suzuki, racing Tony Elias specifically, and how he uses his equipment. And I thought at the beginning of the season they had done a good job at it. And I think either they've gone in a direction that's not allowing them to be as raceable with those Suzukis, or Yosh has made another jump on, with Tony on raceability of that motorcycle. But let me ask you this question, Jason.
Yep.
What if you took 12 Superbike races, and you averaged all their time, the margin of victory? What would be like competitive? Like, where do you think would be like, oh, if you averaged 3 seconds a race win, this would be a good series? Like, what would a number you'd put on it be?
You mean as far as from first to second?
Yeah, average win margin of victory. Average win margin of victory.
Well, I think if you keep anything in and around a second, or a couple seconds, I think is a good race. I mean, if you see somebody getting pushed, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so far this season, the total margin of victory, if you add up all the time for 12 races, the total margin of victory is 20.8 seconds. So when you average that out over 12, the average margin of victory is 1.7. And that's with Garrett Gerloff's bell curve blowing 4.4. I mean, we've had a couple races, where Road Atlanta, Tony won 2.7, 1.8. And then we go to VIR, and Beaubier won 3.5. JD won 3.7. Remember, in that rain race. But the rest of them have all been 2 seconds or under, with the exception of what Garrett did. So I'm very interested to see, because in talking to the principals of MotoAmerica, they're like, we think we have the closest racing. And I'm like, well, barring obviously Moto2 or Moto3, I mean, you guys probably do have some of the best racing. And to have an average margin of victory over 12 races at 1.7 is pretty darn good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, because we have a couple that are 2/10, 5/10. The Coda race one where Tony won was 0.089 of a second. So remember that. So yeah, it's been interesting to crunch those numbers and really look at it from that perspective, and just how incredible Garrett Gerloff did. I mean, Tony and Cam were racing each other up, so that may have slowed their pace down a smidge,
Well, there's no question. I mean, if you watch those guys, you're 100% right. It could have been closer, but all three of those guys were battling pretty hard, yes.
But they still went faster. In second and third, still went faster than the race winning pace the day before.
I just think our series is pretty solid. Moving on to SuperSport. I watched SuperSport race, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and it was weird because kind of the way things overlapped for Greg and I this weekend at the way the Fox show was, and we didn't get to call the SuperSport race. So Greg, I went out to my favorite spot at Laguna. There's a spot up at the end of pit lane that I sit up on top of the hill on the inside of turn 1 where nobody can get to. And I can sit up there by myself and I can see him coming out of Rainy all the way into 11, up over turn 1, through 3, 4, and then up the hill. I can see so much of the track. But we said on our podcast after Utah that win by Bobby Fong was, to me, I think the win at Utah was probably his most influential win that he'll have of his career, because he showed a lot of patience. Yeah, he nipped Hayden at the line, but we rolled into Laguna. Hayden Gillum gets pole position. Somebody predicted that Hayden Gillum might run away with that race. I'm not going to mention any names.
Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat.
At the beginning of that race, Bobby Fong took off. Hayden tried to catch him and flicked it away into turn 5, and has been the case this year. We've seen a lot of our front runners for the championship make big mistakes. And Bobby Fong's interview at the first race at Utah, before the first race, he said, I'm going to do the best I can, and whatever I can learn tonight, I'm going to put it to use tomorrow and hopefully try to win. He finished second in the first race at Utah, came back the second day and won. And then at Laguna, literally just looked at a class by himself. I mean, he looked really good. He ended up controlling that race, controlling the distance. He runs 27.1 to win over PJ Jacobsen, who was good to see him do well. PJ Jacobsen finishes second, only 1.6 back. I wouldn't even say it was that close.
Yeah. It wasn't. Bobby slowed down.
Right. Richie Escalante, third. Sean Dillon Kelly continues to impress, ends up fourth. And then you look back, Josh Hayes, fifth. I think that what Bobby Fong did this weekend was really try to say, the championship's going to come through me now. Like, I think he's riding with that kind of confidence.
I would agree. And he's got a really good platform underneath him. He can do it in a way that's very controlled. And, when we go to these next few tracks, go to Pittsburgh, up and down, twisty, flowy racetrack. And I just think it's very interesting. I think watching PJ Jacobsen, his post-race interview, I mean, he just seems so frustrated at this point, and I just hope that let's see, I don't think he's been to Sonoma, but I know he's tested at Pit Race. I think he's been to Jersey before. So there might be some tracks they're going to for PJ that are going to give him a little boost towards the end of the season. But Richie Escalante continues to impress. I think he's got to just figure a couple little tiny things out. Sean Dillon Kelly finishing fourth. He struggled a bit, he said, this weekend, like I saw on social media. I didn't get to talk to him very much at all. If you look down the list, like finishing 10th was Caroline Olsen. She finishes 51 seconds behind the leader. If you look at the way she's been finishing, at the first part of the season, she's closed that gap down by a few seconds. So, it had been like 57-ish. So she's getting quicker and quicker, as the season goes on. So you have these kind of, battles that are forming up. You have the front battles, you have these kind of middle battles, and so on.
Yep.
So it's, and again, this is what is supposed to be feeding the Superbike class. So we keep a real close eye on it.
We do. And, you got Bryce Prince, Aguilar, McFadden, Silva finished in 6, 7, 8, 9. Caroline obviously finished 10th. And when you think about all the stuff and you look at the field again, has gotten so much faster. When we looked at the overall time again, from first back, the field itself has gotten so much quicker. And it's so to Nick McFadden was actually up front in one of the sessions this week. And I actually heard at one point he was leading a session. I'm like, man, it's so cool to see Nick like up front, but he ends up 8th. Fastest lap to fastest lap, he was 8/10 off of Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the field itself has gotten faster. Even talking to Josh, Hayes, he's like, Jay, he goes, I can't really explain it. He's like, I'm 10 seconds back, and I feel like I'm riding great. Typical Josh. I haven't ridden as much. He's got so many more responsibilities now off the track that he didn't have, in his prime.
Very
let's
true.
Just say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on. He's coaching guys. And he's doing a really cool.
He doesn't have a whole factory team behind him anymore either, right?
Doesn't have a factory team. Maybe some of the resources aren't there. Melly does everything she can to give him the best bike she can. It's still a great bike. she's there racing. They've got they got the little guy ripping around.
Hawk
on his on the Strider. Isn't that what he's on?
Strider,
yeah,
Strider. Little blue Strider.
Hawk's he's just ripping around on that thing,
like nonstop, like he is on the gas.
A lot of moving parts for the whole Hayes clan. So, it's there's a lot of things, but 600 category, again, we're going to get a lot more in depth with some of the stuff when we do our MotoAmerica only podcast. We'll get back into.
But Bobby Fong leads the championship by 18 in that one. And then, Jason, there's Junior Cup. Rocco Landers, 9.2 seconds, completely dominated that race. I mean, looked fantastic. He's now got a 26-point lead in that championship. And we'll definitely get more into Junior Cup. But Rocco right now just seems like the cream of the crop.
We saw Dallas do what he did
Dallas
there
Daniels,
at Dallas Daniels. We saw Dallas Daniels do what he did at Utah. And it was almost like it's kind of what Rocco needed. Just a little bit of a slap to go like, hey. And it wasn't even close. Kid was going basically a second a lap quicker than these guys from the majority of the race. I mean, when you look at it, Greg, he had how many laps? 12 laps, and he won by 9.2 seconds. And towards the end, he finally slipped up into the 1 minute 38 range, which is where those guys were. Racing. So, I think that Rocco just did what he had to do.
And he credited after, didn't he? He said, look, that loss really, I went home and worked really hard. And it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. And he's, got a bit of a lead in the championship. I think you look at Stock 1000, that class is just getting more and more loaded with more riders. But Andrew Lee, he wins by less than a second. And it was an interesting race because he ends up running 1:26.8, which I think you said is like at the time was only 1.8 off of Superbikes from that same day. The super stock category 1000 class is not like it used to be. So people want to compare lap times from when the Herons and Skolts and Jake Lewises and all that. The bikes are different. They're completely different.
They're
so
totally different.
Even though they're both called super stock bikes. So Andrew Lee wins over Jeff May, who in turn beats Stefano Mesa, who continues to just rack up podiums this year, does Stefano. He's doing a great job. Travis Wyman, Gilbert Debrino, there finishes sixth. When you look at it, there's some, we had, I forget how many entries we had, Greg. We got a bunch of entries for that class this weekend.
27. Yeah, 27.
But Andrew looks pretty solid. I have to say that the points lead that he has isn't like, it's not big. It's only 11. I mean, Mesa's done a good job keeping everything kind of in control, but Andrew's done a real good job. Did you get to watch that race?
I watched it all. And the thing with Jeff May just could put constant pressure on Andrew. It was just there. It wasn't like it got a gap and he chased him down. He was just there, just a couple tenths behind. I mean, 0.9 of a second, the margin of victory, really, it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was a half of a second margin of victory.
Yep.
And that's the thing that impressed me the most about Andrew. Lead, Franklin Armory, Graves, Kawasaki, is the dude just doesn't mess up.
Nope.
But I do have to say, there
solid.
were some times late in that race, and it was only a 12-lap race, and there's same tires that Superbikes use. So you figure it shouldn't really be a tire issue necessarily, even though the electronics are rudimentary compared to a Superbike. But there were times there when Andrew, towards the end of the race, started really pushing the bike around.
Yep.
And the thing that's impressive about Andrew is that I think you can see his like a motocross background of some sort, because he just has control of the bike even when it starts to spin. So it's like he likes to keep it in a line. He's got very much, a lot of control over it. And when the bike starts to loosen up, he seems like he has the same control. And so that to me is really impressive. I enjoyed watching the race. It wasn't race back and forth, but it was that constant pressure. Is this guy going to choke? Is he going to mess up? He's a young kid. What's he going to do? And he just answered every little shot that Jeff May had. And Jeff's a veteran, obviously. He knows how to put pressure on people. And Andrew didn't flinch.
Do you want to know and I'm giving a little secret away here, okay? So, and Andrew will either, he'll kill me probably, but I'll tell you what the most impressive thing about Andrew is, right? Andrew's kind of like one of the kids I work with, right?
I do.
All right. He sends me a text last night saying, Jason, can you please put a day aside and tell me how much it's going to cost? Because there's a couple specific things I need your help on, because I feel like I can be winning these races easier and more if I can just work out. Like there's something in his writing right now that we have talked about that he wants to get better at, and the kid's not stopping. Like it's not that he's not content with winning these races, but he feels like there's still one specific area that we need to address with him that he's like, I want to get better at it. And the fact that, of course, he's one of my guys, so literally a day or two later, he's asking me this stuff like, hey, can you put a day aside for me? It's incredible. A kid's he's on it right now.
The one thing, if I have a knock on Andrew Lee, Jason, and I think you and I have had this conversation, and it's not really a knock, it's just more of an observation, is Andrew at the moment doesn't have like explosive speed. And what I mean by explosive speed is if you look at Tony Elias, the way he rides, or even a Josh Herron, for instance, there are moments in the race when they just try to break free from people and make, you know what I mean? They in cycling, you're putting somebody under duress, like when you're trying to snap their legs off, and Andrew just seems to have more of a steady state, meaning he just goes out, pounds laps out. But it doesn't look to me, at least he hasn't shown it. Maybe he just doesn't need to yet, but that he has that ability to just go, all right, head down for a second. Let me just try to break Jeff May. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
he's very controlling. Like his race IQ is very high. Like he's got a very high race IQ. So it's like he probably has adopted the principle of doesn't matter if I win by 1 second or 10 seconds, as long as I'm winning. And he's going to ride as hard as he feels he needs to in order to do that. That's, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because as a young rider, we sometimes will get lost in the idea that we got to win by more. We got to do this better. We got to do that better. The thing is with him right now is he's just in control. Like he's very much in control. We've seen him win races in a few different manners this year. I think at Utah, everybody thought Jeff was going to take off and win. Andrew sat back, watched, halfway through, takes the lead, walks away. Saw him do it with Michael at Atlanta, same thing. He waited to the last lap, won that way. And then this weekend, he led from the start. So it's interesting. In Super Twins, I got to say, Greg, I was super pumped. We've seen Caleb DeCarriel for a lot of years. It's crazy calling some of these guys veterans that are still so much younger than us, but really Caleb has been around for a long, long time. And when he kind of didn't have the money to go road racing anymore, he's a professional motocrosser. So he was going off and doing his thing, being a professional motocrosser. And I saw him on the grid. Literally, he was the last guy I kind of went past and gave him a pat on the ass and I said, hey, Caleb, like, good luck, man. And he's like, I know. I said to him, hey, all the fun is that way. And I pointed to the front because he started from 12th. All he did was go out and win the race. I mean, he goes out and wins the race, goes 31.8 with like a lap to go, or maybe even on his last lap, turns the fastest lap of the race. But what a huge victory for Caleb DeCarriel over Michael Barnes and Alex Dumas, and then Drake Beecham and Chris Turner rounds out our top five. At the beginning of the Twins race, I don't know if you watched it, but there was 8 of them at the front.
Yeah, I didn't get to see any of it. I was busy with some other TV stuff we were doing. So
yeah,
whatever you say.
There was 8. There was 8 guys. There was 8 guys at the front, and it's always so cool. Just like Garrett Gerloff, it's so neat. And I know Garrett and Caleb are really good friends, but it was just so cool to see a kid that, hey, this kid was coming from 12th. He wasn't even on anybody's radar. Wasn't on mine either, in the sense that, wow, he's back here 12th. And I just kind of simply said, hey, Caleb, slapped him on the ass. The fun's up front, fun's up their way. And he goes out and just wins the race, and it has to be a big weight off of his shoulders. I know him and his brothers and his dad and everybody put a lot into their racing over the years. And again, we'll get back into some of this when we do our MotoAmerica only podcast, because I'm sure that Caleb's going to be showing up at Sonoma, completely different guy, because he's been doing the AFM series out here. So I know he's been based himself a little bit out in California, and maybe we'll get to the bottom of it, but I know he's going to be at Sonoma probably. And that championship, Barney finishes second to extend his points lead. So, old age and treachery still playing through in that championship.
18 points now for Michael Barnes, with only a couple races left in that championship. All right, Jay, what do you say we get on to our quick shift segment? You ready for that?
Let's do it.
For 3 generations, ARAI has been making some of the world's best helmets. And of course, ARAI helmets meet all safety standards, but they also take a lot of pride in a blend of engineering tech and human craftsmanship. And that makes an ARAI helmet fit better and feel better, which protects you better. Now, your head is worth the best. So go visit ARAIAmericas.com for more information on their technology, how you fit a helmet properly, the paint jobs that are available. Then get down to a dealership and try one on. ARAIAmericas.com, because you owe it to you. All right, Jay. So we'll read a couple questions here back and forth, start the clock at about 60 seconds or so, and then we're done talking about it. So the first one, Jay, it was confirmed that Danilo Petrucci has been confirmed to the factory team for 2020 in MotoGP. Too early in the season or good timing for this? What do you think?
Well, we go back and forth with this, don't we, about how early people get chosen? I love it, though, because Petrucci I think he's done a really good job so far this year. I mean, the guy, he's won a race. He's proven that he can beat his teammate. There's a number of things there. I think that he deserves it. Who would we replace him with? That's the question. I don't think that there's anybody out there right now that could do a better job than Petrucci that's in the Ducati fold. So yeah, I think it's a great thing, and it's a good thing for him. He's got job security, and I think it's going to give him a lot of confidence. So we'll kind of see where that goes.
Well, for me, I think it was too early in terms of the drama.
Yep.
I wanted to let this whole thing unfold a little longer to see who on the Ducati team they were dangling the carrot in front of. But
who would it be though, Greg? I mean, I don't think Miller's done enough this year.
No, because that's the thing. It makes perfect sense. All you have to do is just go look at the sheet, the championship point standings, and you'll see how well Petrucci has really performed. Against say Jack Miller, for instance, who's really the only other name that was even on the lips of anyone for that ride.
Yep. All right, Greg. Yamaha introduced up at Laguna Seca an updated R1 and R1M that will run in the Superbike class. Well, what's your take on it? You were there for it, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I like Yamaha and everything else, but to be honest, it was not much of a change. I mean, the chassis is still the same. There were some engine modifications that they breezed over so quickly, and they had said that it was, for emissions, kind of a thing. So other than, electronics updates, revalving of suspension, I mean, in terms of the impact on a superbike, I'm a little concerned actually, because, there's rumors of this bike coming down the pipe and that bike coming down the pipe. And obviously the V4R is already here. You know what I mean? Like I think unless Yamaha is going to introduce a homologation special, they could be in a lot of trouble moving forward in terms of superbike platform. What about you?
It's pretty crazy to me that you say stuff like that, because I'm sitting there, I'm thinking the exact same thing, because I think when you look at World Superbike right now, I'd probably rate the Yamaha in a tie for third. I think the Ducati and Cowie are better. I think the BMW's made a big step and only going to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Yamaha with the BMW is probably pretty close. And then of course we know the Honda right now is absurd. It's a pile. So I mean, it is. Like, I'm not.
No, it is.
You see
it is. They know it is.
And these guys.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so bad. And so Honda knows that. So So when you look at it, and then you think next year Honda's going to make supposedly they've got a really, really like giant killer coming out. And the Ducati Cowie are probably going to get a little better. And then, I agree with you, Greg, 100%. I think right now Yamaha's in a transition, and until they come out with something really, really new, it could be a tough year for them in 20.
Jay, GP1.com posted that a contract is out for Alvaro Bautista to stay where he is in World Superbike, and the number value is the same as it's been. And that was from Stefano Ciccioni, the CEO of Aruba. That's what he said. So with the strong start that he had, and now the disaster that's going on, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think that, the money is where it should be? Or do you think he should, get a raise because he won 11 races to start the season?
That's a tough one. Like, you'd be interested to know how long this contract's been on the table, right? Because it's like, if Bautista, who knows what Bautista had written in his contract about, and I don't think there was anything ever written in Bautista's contract about him getting back into MotoGP if he won the championship. I just don't see that. I don't see the avenue of which they would go, unless Petrucci and Miller were absolutely horrendous this year, which they haven't been. But if they were, and Bautista was winning the championship, then it would have been like, maybe, all right, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to move him to the factory team because he won the World Superbike Championship and give him a year on that bike. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that was probably ever in the works. I think that once you get out of MotoGP, it's almost impossible to get back in, especially on a factory motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, you're going to give the guy a contract, 100%. Like, the guy's a proven race winner. And it sounds sometimes like you and I say bad things about Bautista on here, and that's not the case at all. It's just you got to talk about what you see, and what we've seen this year is a pretty big mental collapse in my estimation. And but you have to hire him. But here's the scary part, Greg. This was his year to win the championship, wasn't it? This was literally his year. Now, everybody's going to get closer. So now from here out, next year and the year on, it's only going to get harder, because I don't feel that I think everybody's going to move a step closer to the Ducati. I don't know how much more the Ducati can move forward. I just don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he snuck up on everybody. It was a big surprise, and he had that 61 points that he could have tried to. But I mean, how often have we seen Alvaro Bautista in the midst of a world championship battle where he's educated enough or has the mindset enough like Johnny Ray does? You know what I mean? So, all right.
Not many are like that, though.
No, and this last thing I want to say, though, is that I forgot to mention, after Laguna, World Superbike sat Johnny Ray and Bautista down in chairs next to each other, and they actually talked about like their rivalry. And a couple things really stood out in that video. If you get a chance to watch it, go see it. That Johnny Ray said that having Bautista in the paddock is his biggest challenge that he's had to face in all of racing. And I think it's, obviously we've seen the way that Ray and his team have reacted now. And I also, Jonathan said, thank you to Bautista for coming into the Superbike class. And I thought that was really cool because, you win 4 titles in a row. I get it. The people are like, blah, 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 blah. Why don't you go GP? And I think maybe this is a bit of a shot in the arm, a bit of a challenge that Johnny appreciates with Bautista. And he's added a lot of eyeballs onto the championship. Bautista's presence has. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, listen, it's race calendar time, right? So go out and watch some racing. This weekend, Pro Motocross is in Millville, Minnesota. One of my favorite places. I love that place. It's Snetterton. Gee, I always thought it was Snetherton, but I guess it's Snetterton.
No.
Yeah,
Snetterton. Yep.
Snetterton hosts British Superbikes. NHRA Pro Stocks is in Denver, Colorado. So make sure you check all that stuff out. Now, for Jason and I, there's really no road racing because everybody's on vacation here for a couple of weeks. So we're probably going to take a couple of weeks off. That's not a promise, by the way. But, in case something big news breaks, we might jump in on the podcast. But you okay with taking a couple of weeks off, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be home recovering with my foot, Greg. So I got all the time in the world. But yeah, no.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So maybe we'll come up with some stuff, but don't be surprised if, because there's no big road races going on and we're not a big motocross podcast or whatever. But that's the plan right now. But always keep an eye on iTunes and everywhere else this podcast is available to see if we upload some more stuff. All right, so that'll do it. Jay, you got anything to say on the close?
No, thanks for everybody listening. Thanks to all the fans that came running up to Greg and I and talked about our podcast and all that. And for sure, if you have questions for us or thoughts or ideas, please, direct message us, contact us however you can, and then and maybe we can work some things into there. And but no, great weekend, Greg, and good luck. I know you're training for a couple big tournaments yourself, so good luck with all that. And
thanks, man. Heal up. I'm sure we'll be on the phone talking on the daily, bro.
You got it, brother. See ya.